I never thought that the day I finally stopped waiting to be seen would become the most powerful moment of my entire life. For 20 years, I woke up before everyone else in that house. I made the tea, I ironed the shirts, I packed the lunches. I listened to everyone's problems and carried every burden quietly, the way you carry something heavy when no one is watching. With two hands, in silence, without complaint. And for 20 years, not one person in that house ever asked me how I was. Not once. My name is Priya, and this is the story of the day I became invisible and what happened when I finally chose to reappear. I married Vikram when I was 24 years old. He was kind then. Or perhaps I was simply too young to know the difference between kindness and convenience. We moved into his family home, a large house in the city, where his parents had lived for 40 years, and where his mother had already decided, long before I arrived, that I would be the newest addition to the household staff. I do not say that bitterly. I say it because it is simply what happened. I cooked every meal. I cleaned every room. I managed every school schedule, every doctor's appointment, every birthday, every festival, every family gathering. I raised two children, Arjun and Mira, almost entirely on my own while Vikram traveled for work and his parents watched television in the living room and occasionally reminded me that the dal needed more salt. But I did not complain, because I loved my children with everything I had. And I believed, the way young women are taught to believe, that love means sacrifice, and sacrifice means silence, and silence means you are a good wife and a good daughter-in-law and a good mother. And so I stayed silent. For 20 years, I stayed silent. It was a Tuesday afternoon in October when everything changed. Mira had come home from college for the weekend. She was 20 now, beautiful and sharp, and full of opinions, the way young people are when the world has not yet asked anything difficult of them. She walked through the front door, dropped her bags in the hallway the way she always did, and sat down at the dining table while I was still finishing the cooking. "What are we eating?" she asked, without looking up from her phone. "Lentil rice," I said, "your favorite." She made a sound, not quite a response, more like an acknowledgement that sound had entered her ears. I placed the food in front of her. She ate quickly, scrolling through her phone with one hand. And then her grandmother walked in and sat across from her and began talking about the neighbor's daughter. How she had a new job, how she was earning well, how she was taking her parents on a foreign holiday. Mira nodded along. And then, without pausing, without looking at me, she said something that I have not been able to forget. She said, "I hope I never end up like some women, just cooking and cleaning their whole lives, wasting themselves." The room did not go silent. That is what surprised me most. No one flinched. No one looked at me. My mother-in-law nodded. Vikram, who had just walked in from work, poured himself a glass of water. I was standing 2 feet away from my daughter, holding a serving spoon. And in that moment, I understood something with complete and terrible clarity. I had spent 20 years making myself invisible. And I had succeeded. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I sat alone in the kitchen. The kitchen I had cleaned 10,000 times, and I asked myself the question I had been afraid to ask for 20 years. Should I stay silent, or should I finally speak up? And for the first time, the answer came to me, not as a feeling, but as a decision. I would not speak. Not yet. I would do something quieter. Something they would not see coming. Because the most powerful kind of response is the kind no one expects from a woman who has spent her whole life being underestimated. I would leave, the plan 7 o'clock, 12 o'clock. What they did not know, what no one in that house had ever bothered to find out, was that for the past 2 years I had been studying. Every night, after the dishes were done and the lights in the bedrooms went out, I would sit at the small desk in the corner of the kitchen and open my laptop. I had enrolled in an online accounting certification course 18 months earlier, paying for it from the small amount of household money I had quietly set aside over several years. Not stolen, set aside. The way you save a little warmth for yourself when everyone else has taken their share of the fire. I had passed my final examination 3 months before that Tuesday in October. I had also, quietly and carefully, opened my own bank account. I had been transferring small amounts into it for 2 years. Nothing dramatic, nothing they would notice, just enough. And I had found a job. A small accounting firm in another city had posted a position 6 weeks earlier. I had applied. I had interviewed over video, in the kitchen, while everyone was asleep. And 2 weeks before Mira came home for the weekend, they had offered me the position. I had not accepted it yet. I accepted it that night. Over the next 8 weeks, I prepared everything with the same quiet attention I had given to 20 years of meals and schedules and ironing and care. I arranged for the utility bills to be paid automatically. I left a detailed household schedule, every service, every contact, every appointment in a folder on the dining table. I wrote each of my children a letter. I wrote Vikram a letter. I did not write one for my in-laws because I had already given them everything I had to give, and I had nothing left to put on paper. On the morning of the 14th of December, I woke up before everyone else. For the last time, I made the tea. I placed the cups on the counter, the way I always had. And then I picked up my single suitcase, packed slowly and carefully over many weeks, a few things at a time so that no one would notice, and I walked out of that house. On the dining table, next to the folder, I left one piece of paper. On it, I had written 7 words. I thought you would notice. You never did. The aftermath 12 o'clock, 17 o'clock. I will not pretend it was easy. The first weeks in the new city were hard in ways I had not expected. Not because I missed the house, I did not miss the house. But because silence, when you have chosen it for yourself, feels very different from silence that is imposed on you. The first kind is freedom. The second kind is a cage. And after 20 years in a cage, even freedom can feel unfamiliar at first. But I worked, and slowly, the unfamiliar became routine. And routine became confidence. And confidence became something I had not felt since I was 24 years old, standing at the beginning of my life before I handed it entirely to someone else. Back in the city, things were not going well. I know this not because I was not watching, but because my sister called me 3 weeks after I left. The house was, as she put it, falling apart. There was no food being made. My mother-in-law had called 3 different relatives to complain that I had abandoned the family. Vikram had gone to work every day without saying anything to anyone. My sister asked me if I wanted to go back. I told her, I am exactly where I am supposed to be. 6 months passed, and then Vikram called. I almost did not answer. But something made me pick up, perhaps curiosity, perhaps the small remaining piece of me that had once loved him and wanted to know if he had changed. He was crying, and Vikram was not a man who cried easily. Arjun's wedding is in 2 weeks, he said. He needs you there, we all need you there. I thought of Arjun, my son, whom I had raised, who had sat at my feet as a small boy and asked me to tell him stories, who had, somewhere along the way, become a man who dropped his bags in the hallway and expected dinner to appear. I said, he has a father, he will be fine. And I ended the call. 3 days later, a letter arrived. Not a message, not a phone call. A letter handwritten on plain white paper. It was from Arjun. He did not ask me to come back. He did not explain or excuse what had happened. He did not list the reasons I should forgive them or tell me what the family needed from me. He wrote only this: Ma, I have been thinking about the morning you left. I remembered that you made tea before you went. You always made tea for everyone before you did anything for yourself. I did not understand that until now. I am sorry I never saw you. I am sorry I never asked. I am not writing to bring you back. I am writing because I want you to know I see you now, and I am proud to be your son. I read that letter 4 times, and then I sat at my desk in my small apartment in a new city, and I made the only decision that felt true. I would go to the wedding, not for Vikram, not for my in-laws, not even for the family. I would go for Arjun, and I would go for myself. But I would go on my own terms. I arrived at the wedding hall on a Saturday evening in June. I was wearing a deep blue sari that I had bought for myself, the first piece of clothing I had bought for myself in 11 years. My hair was done. I was standing straight. Vikram saw me first. He walked toward me and stopped a few feet away, as though he was not sure what kind of welcome I would give him. His eyes were tired. He looked like a man who had recently learned something very expensive. My mother-in-law saw me from across the room. She opened her mouth. I looked at her calmly, directly, with 20 years of composure behind my eyes, and she closed it again. Mira came to me first. She hugged me without saying anything. Her shoulders shook slightly. I held her because she was still my daughter regardless of everything, and nothing needed to be said between a mother and her child. And then Arjun came. He was wearing his wedding clothes, and he looked so much like the small boy who had sat at my feet, asking for stories that for a moment I could not speak. He took both my hands in his and said simply, "You came." "Of course I came," I said. "I am your mother." The evening passed. The ceremony was beautiful. And then, at the dinner, the bride's father stood up and gave a toast, warm and generous, about family and love and new beginnings. And then he looked across the table at me and said, with genuine kindness, "Would the mother of the groom like to say a few words?" He said something that made the entire hall suddenly go quiet. I had not planned to speak, but when the moment came, I understood that I had been preparing for it for 20 years. I stood up. I looked around the room, at the faces I knew, at the faces I did not know, at my son in his wedding clothes, at my daughter whose words I had never forgotten, at the man I had once loved, at the woman who had spent 20 years reminding me I was not enough. And I spoke not with anger, not with bitterness, not with the sharp edge of someone who has been waiting to wound. I spoke the way I had always spoken, with quiet dignity and complete honesty. I said, I am Priya. I am Arjun's mother. I raised him mostly alone, and I am not saying that to diminish anyone. I am saying it because it is true, and I spent too many years not saying things that were true. I paused. I cooked 10,000 meals in 20 years. I gave everything I had to a family that did not notice until I was gone. And when I left, I was afraid. Not because I did not know how to live on my own, but because I had forgotten that I was allowed to. I turned to Arjun. You wrote me a letter. You did not ask me for anything. You simply told me that you saw me, and that letter is the greatest gift anyone has given me in 20 years. The hall was completely still. I am proud of you, my son, not because of what you have achieved, but because of the man you chose to become when no one was asking you to. I looked at Vikram. He was looking at the table. I forgive you, I said quietly, but I am not coming home. And then I looked at my mother-in-law, just for a moment, and I said nothing. Because sometimes, silence is the most complete sentence you can speak. I sat down. No one moved for a long moment. And then the bride's father began to clap. Slowly at first. Then the whole room followed resolution, 27 o'clock 29:30. After the wedding, Arjun walked me to my car. We stood together in the cool night air. He was still in his wedding clothes. He looked young and a little overwhelmed, and exactly the way a person looks when they are standing at the beginning of something new. He hugged me for a long time. Will you visit? He asked. Yes, I said, often. And Mira? Mira knows where I am. When she is ready, she will come. He nodded. He opened my car door for me, something he had never done in his life, and waited until I was inside. I drove away. In the rearview mirror, I could see him still standing there, watching. And for the first time in 20 years, I was not driving toward someone else's life. I was driving toward my own. If you have spent years pouring yourself into people who have never once stopped to ask if you are empty, hear me when I say this. Your silence is not your strength. Your disappearance is not your punishment. Your visibility on your own terms, in your own time, is your power. I was not a maid. I was not a servant. I was not invisible. I was a woman who had simply forgotten, for a very long time, that she was allowed to be seen. If you stand up for yourself with truth and with courage, no one in this world can take your dignity away from you. Not even the people who forgot you existed. Especially not them.